Greetings, viewer. More monstrous piffle from down under by yours truly. That's all right. Switch off and go to the next video. Confess it's been a real struggle finishing these last couple of units, but I can happily now say that as much as a Napoleonic collection, it's never really finished. And yes, I've got spare units, which we might have a look at in a minute, or spare figures to be painted up. I'm quite happy now to look at what I've done and say, no, that's enough for the time being. Not just for my sanity, but also I think the time has come to knuckle down and decide, well, look, what rules are you going to use? Which we'll talk about either later or in another video. What you're looking at here is the two videos that, the two units that I've been working on. Again, look, nothing to write home about on the painting front. I've said a million times before on these videos, I'm just a basic block painter. It's a style that I started back in the late 80s. I've been happy with. It looks okay from 12 inches. Yes, there should be all sorts of detail that I simply, perhaps once upon a time, could do, but can't now. The colouring in the grenadier caps, I think that should have white striping across it. What else? Probably on things like... there could be a bit more detail on the officers and possibly the grenadier, not lapels, you know what I mean, across their shoulders. Could have a bit more detail. But I'm not getting any younger, and it's as good as I can do. Without wanting to elicit sympathy or complaining, the lumps are spreading, one there, one here, one there, down the middle here, and there's one starting to come up here. Yeah, doesn't make life necessarily easier. But I think probably more than anything else, and I don't know whether it's tied in with growing old, but a loss of general loss of enthusiasm. I really struggle sometimes to get the enthusiasm up. Yeah, don't know. Now, you might notice, those of you who are true grognards will be looking at my effort at these Prussian Guard hussars, which in one sense are a bit of a waste of time because I don't think they existed before 1815, and then they didn't take part in the Waterloo campaign anyway. But for my purposes, to make all the different armies balanced, I've gone ahead and done some. Now, you grognards will also notice they've got a flag. That happens to be a dragoon flag. You're probably thinking, well, why the hell have you got a dragoon flag on there, Ian? Prussian hussars did not carry flags. But again, this comes back to what I've spoken about many times before on my piffless productions. A lot of my figures go back to the even late 70s, but certainly through the 80s and perhaps into the early 90s. There was no internet. There was no surplus of information. A lot of this detail was simply either unknown or not provided. And so if I'm guilty of that, well, you know, so were the companies, because I mean, as you can see, Minifigs produced a Prussian flag-bearing hussar, and I think that was probably true of most ranges. I think it's difficult to understate the sheer amount of information that is now available to gamers of a particular historical period. I'm thinking here in particular of Napoleonics. The sheer volume of information that even, 15, 20 years ago simply wasn't there. And as far as it being a dragoon flag, well, as I say, the Hussars didn't carry flags, so that's an Essex dragoon flag, and I like to have flags on my units. Again, the painting's nothing to look at, but from 12 inches look fine. I do find with deteriorating eyesight, deteriorating use of the hands is also a deteriorating patience. Things like painting the cords on the uniform. I used to be able to do it really well. The chevrons on the side of a drummer, I used to be able to do that really well. These days, not so much. I even struggle to see where the chevron should be. You've just been looking at the completed Austrian Army. Now obviously that unit there will go in there. These are the 3 trays of the Austrian armies, which includes Allied minor state units. That's the Prussian Guard with their allies up that end, which, as I say, will include this particular unit here. Is any Napoleonic collection ever really finished? No. And I do have bags of figures that I can in due course add to, but I'm quite happy now to just say, no, that's it for the time being. It's time for me to knuckle down and decide which rules I'm going to use. Part of the dilemma of that is, just for example, say this group here. Now, as you can see, I've got 2 other lots of 4 Austrian grenadiers there, Austrian and Hungarian grenadiers. Now, the question becomes, how on a table am I going to, and even packing up, putting away or putting out, how am I going to decide which stands belong to which units? Now, depending on the rules, I was thinking that perhaps I could, or one system I've used is, say, if this group of 4 here belong to one unit, you use, I think it's a Prussian system, red, yellow, white, and light blue, and you paint most of the rear stand here of, say, one unit. You might paint it mostly red or mostly light blue or etc., and then you have one little spot of paint over here in a corner to signify its difference from other units. And again, this comes down to which sort of rules. If I'm, am I using rules that need 4 stand units? Am I going to use rules that need 6 stand units? Am I going to use rules like et sans resultat, or a new set of rules I'm looking at called Eagles to Glory, where every stand is its own individual unit, etc., etc. But yeah, so that's the Austrian collection done. So I've got Austrian, French, of course, British and their allies, Russian and Prussian. Some of them aren't quite as large. Some of them don't have quite as many spare reserve units or spare units that are painted up and based. But basically they're done. The Spanish, I've got to make up my mind whether I'm just going to use them as an adjunct to the British in the Peninsular Campaign, or whether I'm going to try and have just a small army, probably only 2 trays worth, by themselves. as a separate army, so I can have a little, French, Spanish battle down in the peninsula. Okay, let's pause that there, and then there's a few more things I want to talk about. Item I forgot to have a chat about. I mentioned about how I wanted to replace flags and also perhaps some of the lances on some of the figures. Naismith figures round, I think it was round way. I don't think either manufacturer, I don't know whether they exist. I don't think they're a going concern anyway. But some of the older ranges used to carry these moulded flags, fairly thick, chunky, oversized. Now, as you can see there, I've cut them off. Now, this sort of big, thicker flag originally came from a unit like this. Now, I had intended, now you can see here I've, get in focus, Ian, focus, you can do it. You can see there I've replaced with a paper flag. Looks like it slid down the pole a bit. Oh well. I had originally intended to completely remove that top section there of the flag pole and just replace it with a metal pin. But I realised, I don't know if it's going to show it because it's black on black. Perhaps from this angle, you can see the flag pole down here is quite thick. And I thought, oh, might look a bit weird with this great big thick flagpole bottom and then this skinny little metal top. So I had a bash at actually cutting off that metal flag, which you can see I succeeded. Now, the only thing was I couldn't get it quite up fully close to the light's a bit strange here today. I couldn't get it quite fully up to the flagpole, so I don't know if you can see there, but it does, there's a little sort of a loop around what was left of the flag that was there. So it doesn't quite, the flag doesn't quite sit flush up with the flagpole because there is a teeny bit of that metal flag still there. But I think from a distance, I think, you've really got to get right down to notice it, to complain about it. Likewise, some of the light cavalry with the smaller flags, I did actually think of leaving the smaller flags on because they really weren't too bad, and I could have possibly sit one of these paper flags over the top. But in the end, I decided to bite the bullet. Same trick, cut it off, pop in a flag, and again, I don't know whether you can see there, there was a little bit of excess metal on the flagpole. I wasn't going to cut too right up to the flagpole in case the flagpole itself snapped. But fortunately, they've turned out to be fairly sturdy. But you can see there's perhaps a little bit of a bulge where the flag wraps around the flagpole. Okay, no collection is ever finished. I won't go into all the infantry, spare infantry that I've got that I could paint up, but just to give you an example, if I decide to expand, I guess, the guard cavalry part, things like I got some French Empress Dragoons from Essex. Now, this is nothing that all of you haven't seen a million times before in a different thing, but yeah, groups of French Empress dragoons that I could add to increase the size of the reserve or guard cavalry component. Russians, 2 bags. One is mounted Yagers, I think. Mounted guard. I could turn them into mounted guard Yagers. These could be mounted guard dragoons, which are a bit like the Pavlov grenadiers. They have green, but with a nice big red plastron on the front. They might look quite nice. Austrians, I've got a spare bag of hussars. Now, Austrians, of course, didn't have guards, but so the primary regiments I use as the reserve. So, 1st Grenadiers, 1st Cuirassiers, and I think they're often called Empress or Emperor, whatever, dragoons, etc. Likewise, the Prussians, I've got some, I think they're actually meant to be actual guard lancers, because they've got the Zapka on them as well. So that's the sort of thing I can do. And I mentioned about, expanding the Spanish out to be their sort of own army. Oh yeah, I've got more bags of infantry, quite a few more militia. Again, Essex figures. I mentioned before about the Essex figures. Some of the more popular ones, I think the moulding may have seen better days. The Spanish, probably because they're not quite so popular. The moulding seems to be a bit crisper, cleaner, and most importantly, the little stands. I can actually get these to stand up quite reasonably, whereas some of the others, the Russians I got, was a bit of a problem. And of course a little bit of extra Spanish cavalry if I decide to go ahead and turn them into their own little force, which doubtless, you know me, I will. Alrighty. All right, what else do I want to piffle on about? One of the joys of being a crusty, cantankerous old chook, old fella, who mostly games solitaire, is I can amend rules to suit myself ad infinitum. Having said that, that doesn't stop me from trying to find a rule set that as such I can live with. Most of the rule sets that I'm personally drawn to, possibly because of my background of board games, Napoleonic board games, which the ones I had were very strategic, or at the very least grand tactical in nature. I've always been drawn to grand tactical rules. Perhaps delusions of grandeur, but I've always thought of, if I play a Napoleonic game, I want to be Wellington, I want to be Blucher, I want to be Count Schwarzenberg, I want to be Barclay de Tolly, etc., etc., etc. The old line, column, square, that's important, but it's not the be-all and end-all to me. So I've never really been interested in just setting up a division on each side and having a go. I want to replay Waterloo. I want to replay Aspern-Essling, etc., etc. So hence the little collection of rules in front of you are some of the ones that I'm going to be looking at, trying to, I think probably amend would be the best word I could use to suit myself. There's 2 here, Age of Eagles, which is basically a Napoleonic version of Fire and Fury. My good friend Dave believes he might be able to procure a copy for myself. And the other one is Bloody Big Battles, which I'm advised is actually an even sort of higher level of fire and fury. It's set in the not the Napoleonic period. It was to be set in the later part of the 19th century. But I believe it is largely sort of based on fire and fury, but sort of taken even another level up. We shall see. Understand I can get that direct from North Star Miniatures. They do a Napoleonic version, I believe. Oh, excuse me. Anyway, Field of Glory. Now this is the second edition, the Napoleonic version. That's now been, well, if you like, superseded, redone by a rule set. Glory is fleeting. I've spoken about that before. Brett Preston Thomas, who I believe is based over in New Zealand, and another chap here in Australia, I think originally from South Africa. Oh, isn't that awful? I've forgotten his name. I'm getting old. So this is why I need my own nice simple rules, because I can't keep up with it anymore. But anyway, chances are he'll never know that this is what I'm talking about. But no, Brett Preston Thomas, he's released Glorious Fleeting. Now these are available for free as a download from the Glory is Fleeting website. You do have to join the Glory is Fleeting, when I say website, Facebook. You do have to join that Facebook page, that Facebook group. But then you can freely download the rules to have a look at, have a read through, perhaps have a play test. And if you really like them, you can order a printed version online from Amazon. Now they are a competition set of rules, and they do have a couple of quirks that I really don't like. Nonetheless, might be worth a look at. My all-time favourite set of Grand Tactical rules bar none is Blucher. So why am I looking to change that? It's now whether you like these rules or not, whether you like Sam Mustafa's rules or not, one thing you cannot argue with, Sam, I think, writes the most clear, concise rules I think that just about I have ever come across. Now, all rules, you have the odd one thing or two where you scratch your head and go, oh, I wonder what they mean by that. But Sam Mustafa, to me, is a brilliant writer. This is a brilliant production. The one thing I don't like, it's perfect up to the combat. Now, this is only my own personal thoughts. I do understand what Sam is trying to do. Now, there's just a typical, this is where you use cards instead of miniatures. Sam uses what I'd call an attritional model. You see here, you've got these numbers. What happens is this unit, when it fights, it starts off as a strength of 6. It rolls 6 dice. Then as it accrues casualties, it drops to 4, down to 3. It's only rolling 3 dice, that sort of thing. So by the time you get down to 1, of course, you're in trouble. That's not a system I like. I prefer units that fight at basically, I guess, full strength with some modifiers for losses. But and particularly at this higher level, because you don't get the entire brigade fighting at once at any one time. But I prefer rules where, say, the unit gets to a tipping point. It fights at full strength, maybe perhaps with a -1 if the opposing unit has got greater numbers, that sort of thing. But it gets to a tipping point where it, I guess, for lack of a better word, collapses. it no longer becomes a fighting element, and so it retreats off the table. The trouble with this sort of set of rules, now I know why Sam's done it, it's because he's trying to encourage you to keep a reserve so that when your unit strengths in your corps are getting down to 2, you've got some reserves. You need to send the reserves there to plug the gap, or if you've worn down the enemy to where most of theirs are down to 2, you send your reserves there to break through. So I understand what he's trying to achieve, but I simply I'm just not a fan. I'm sorry. I'm not a fan of the combat system. Personal choice. Doesn't mean I'm right and he's wrong. Doesn't mean I'm wrong and he's right. Just personal choice. This is close to perfection, but up to that point. So what I'm looking for is something that can make the combat at the grand tactical level, I don't know, more on a unit per unit sort of base. It sans resultat. Interesting set of rules. Basically, you were manoeuvring entire divisions. I'll see if I can find a page. And when you ran into the enemy, you basically formed up bombardment and skirmish fire. You didn't do it unit by unit. Each stand was a battalion or squadrons or whatever, artillery base. You didn't fire or fight the skirmish or bombardment individually, but rather you totaled up everything and you came up with a figure and you rolled. And you were more damaging. Each corps had its own sort of total of points, and so you were trying to damage that set of core points. I'm probably not explaining this very well. But once again, it was the individual combat later where individual unit took on individual unit. It was basically, this unit's a 7, this one's a 5. You rolled a dice and that was it. There was no square, there was no firefight. It just left me a bit cold. Once again, close, but didn't tickle my fancy. Eagles to Glory, new set of rules. Rather interesting. A D10, you roll to move the units within a division, all the usual modifiers, etc., etc. A die 20 for the combat, and combat is even bombardment and skirmish is unit versus unit, not the entire division versus someone else's entire division. Very interestingly, it is possible, because combat is simultaneous, when you have combat and firefights and melee put together as one, but very interestingly, you can have a situation where 2 units are in combat and either A, nothing will happen, B, one side retreats, or C, one side is eliminated. You'd say, yep, well, that's normal. But you can also have B, both sides have to retreat, and C, both sides are eliminated. Now, so it's a little bit similar, I think, to et sans resultant. It's similar in scale, sort of one base is a battalion, or a cavalry, it's equivalent to 2 squadrons, and one base is equivalent to a battery. So I'm a little bit intrigued by these. I've got to be honest, and it could just be me because I'm old and cranky, but I've got to be honest and say I find these rules poorly written, poorly organised. Now, having said that, before everyone jumps on board and wants to crucify me, Chris Mikulski and Tim Harwood bending over backwards to answer any questions. on the Facebook group. So you cannot fault their efforts. In defence of myself, saying that the rules are poorly organised, poorly written, I would point out that there is a ever-growing, frequently asked question that you can download from the Facebook group. And the pages are fairly dense, and so far there's 7 pages of them. So before you rush to, those of you who support these rules, before you rush to crucify me, I would just mention that in passing. But anyway, it does have some interesting ideas. I still think Blucher is my sort of go-to rule set, but I'm just wondering whether the combat system from either Eagles to Glory, Field of Glory Napoleonic, or now Glory is Fleeting, or Et Sans Resultat, or perhaps even the Age of Eagles, or what's the other set? Bloody Big Battles. I might be able to tag on top of the Blucher system for combat purposes. We shall see. Better wrap that up there. I'm piffling away 10 to the dozen. Yes, I am largely disappointed and disillusioned with YouTube. I shall press on for the time being. I have taken down a lot of older videos. One doesn't wish to blow one's own trumpet, but the more I look at it now, the more I think I want to leave something that can be of some use to people. There are dozens of people out there painting figures 10 times better than I ever will be. I think the best videos, the videos with the most purpose I have ever done was where I tried to give you a review of the Napoleonic rule sets. My mind's gone blank, by Sam Mustafa. Well, I sort of tried to explain a bit about the map movement in Blucher. What was that other bloody rule set? Just a sec. And we're back. There we go, LaSalle, 2nd edition. You idiot, Ian. Now, not pretending to be an expert on either of those rule sets, but hopefully I was able to give people a little bit of an idea, a little bit of a taste as to whether they might be worth pursuing further. And I think for the future of what I'm going to produce on YouTube, I think that's the direction for me. You may have noticed I did do this rather long and large campaign using board games, War at Sea and Victory in the Pacific. The more I went back over them, the more I was less satisfied with my efforts. I'm only an old bloke with a little handheld camera. They were a niche market, so I got rid of them, as I have some of the other videos posted earlier, because basically they were piffless piffle. All right, time to edit, put it together, stick it online, and let everybody unsubscribe. Yeah, plans for the future, apart from working on these and these other rule sets that I've mentioned. Strangely to me, one of the most watched videos I ever did was little old 15mm Napoleonic count. Some 3,000, 4,000 views, God knows why. The worst video I think I've ever produced, and it was just me counting the figures, but seemed to be something that people wanted to have a look at. Now that I've sort of reached that point of semi-completing my Napoleonic collection, as a last hurrah for the 15mm before I start working on the 28mm again, perhaps 15mm Napoleonic count number 2. Anyway, all the best to everyone. Take care, and talk to everyone again soon. Bye. Bye for now.